switch gears a little bit, I think a lot of students on this panel really want to know, how do lawyers become judicial officers, specifically in the Los Angeles Superior Court? And Judge Edber, if you'd like to start.
Well, to get on the bench as a judge, there are two ways, and I'll just discuss them briefly. You can run for election, or you can be appointed by the governor. So those are the two ways to go. Most of the people on the bench have been appointed, but you can also run for election, and we have election season coming up for some of our bench officers. So those are the two ways.
Wonderful, thank you. Judge Shu, do you have anything to add?
Well, those are the two ways. Did you want us to talk about the specifics of it?
If you'd like to go through it more, we have plenty of questions.
Sure. So I can't comment about the election process because hopefully I will never run in one. But the appointment process I can comment on. There's an application form that's on the governor's website. It's really long, and it all has to be done online. So you prepare all of your answers in a Word document and then start cutting and pasting into the governor's application. But it asks a lot of questions. I think there's over 60 questions on the form. Some of them that require essay answers that will ask you all about your career. And actually even beyond that, for people who have had careers prior to being lawyers, it'll ask you about that too. They're trying to get a complete picture of who you are. And then what they'll do is they'll be, at least under this governor, it's my understanding that they'll do the appointment secretary. There's a person that's in charge of this at the governor's office. And they will go through and they'll do kind of an initial vet. They'll sort of, does this person pass the smell test? Is this somebody we could see, appointing to the bench? At which point they'll send it to a local committee that's comprised of approximately 10, but it varies over the course of time, lawyers and judges in your local area, in our case in Los Angeles County, to do sort of a background check on you, and then they will, talk to people that you've litigated with, and more importantly, against. They'll talk to the judges that you've appeared in front of, if you have, and they'll try to get a more sort of detailed background check on you. And then a recommendation will be made to the governor's office, and if the governor decides that they want to proceed past that stage, then you'll get sent out to two committees. There's a local committee here in Los Angeles. It's run by the LA County Bar Association. And then statewide, there's the Jenny Commission, the Judicial Nominations Committee, and Nominations and Evaluation Committee. And they will come up with a rating. They'll do more interviews, and you'll go through this whole process. And then you'll go into this black box where at some point the governor's office will call you, or they may not. And so that's sort of formally how the process goes.
Thank you so much, Judge Shu. So now that we know the two ways that you can get to the bench and the rigorous vetting process that one has to go through, what should law students keep in mind to best prepare themselves for a career that will eventually lead them to the bench? And I'd love to start with Judge Bershon.
So I'm old enough that when I started law school, we didn't even really have the internet. We certainly didn't have social media, and that was a good thing. So if I can't stress enough for all of you, be careful and wise and savvy in your use of social media. If there's one thing you take home from this message and this program, you can't unring those bells, and things that you think are private somehow or other wind up not being private. And I know with I am confident that none of you on this call or this Zoom would ever say anything racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever it is, but you may be part of a group, unfortunately, where somebody is. And then that comes up, and social media has been the death knell of so many people, and they are going to be vetting you. It's Judge Shu said, this is your life. They're looking at you from start to finish. And if there is something out there that reflects poorly upon you, they're going to find it. So think about that. And then that rings true regardless of what you want to do, whether you want to be a judge, whether you want to be a prosecutor, a defense attorney, a private attorney. Just think wise and think smart, because that will stay with you forever. So make wise choices now, not just in your social media use, but once you become attorneys, whether it's in civil litigation or you go to criminal or whatever you're doing, be ethical, be reasonable, be fair. I did civil litigation for a minute, and I remember when we were doing discovery and discovery requests, I would ask somebody for a continuance, they would say no. They would ask me for a continuance, I would always say yes, because there's no reason to engage in that. And then they remember, right? You were the person that extended them that courtesy when you didn't need to, and they will find those people. They, as Judge Shu mentioned, the questionnaire goes out to everybody, and they don't really necessarily, they focus on everybody, but they really focus on your opposing counsel, right? And so if you have opposing counsel out there who felt like you were unethical, you treated them poorly, you had bad demeanor, they're going to remember that, and they will let that committee know. So your reputation starts now, and you never get a second opportunity to make a first impression. So keep that in the back of your mind. I think that's good advice, regardless of what you do in the legal profession. LA County seems like a very large town, but it's amazing what a small town it is in terms of the legal profession and who you cross paths with. You could be sitting across the table from someone who you were opposing counsel with in a case, and 10 years later, they're the hiring partner at a firm you want to work for. You just never know when you're going to run into people again.
Those are really important reminders, Judge Bershon. Thank you so much. Everything on the internet does live forever. Judge Weller, do you have anything to add on what we as students can do to best prepare ourselves for a career that leads us to the bench?
I would suggest, regardless of whatever discipline or area you choose, keeping a journal, your own personal journal of milestones, teachable moments, anything that you consider important to you, keep it for a couple of reasons. One, when you decide to apply, they're going to be asking you a lot of questions about your background. In order to apply to become a judge, you would have had to have practiced for 10 years. You may have a great memory, but some of the details you may forget. And so it comes in handy to have that journal. For example, I kept a journal of my trial experiences. When I started journaling, I didn't do it for the purpose of becoming a judge. I did it so that with each trial experience, I would recalling the mistakes that I made, how I can improve my in-court style. And so what I end up using for me to become a better advocate helped me as a judge, because some of the questions they'll ask is, if you were a trial attorney, they'll ask you about previous court cases, the facts of that case, opposing counsel. So that was easier for me because I literally had a trial journal and I could look back. But this advice applies even if you're not a prosecutor, defense attorney, or even if you're civil. That's why I said any landmark or challenging deposition or motion, whatever you feel like was just some type of teachable moment or big moment or significant moment in your legal career, you may want to start doing that journal now, and that'll save you less time in the future when you apply.
That is fantastic advice, I think, regardless of what type of law we're practicing. I love that. Judge Shu, do you have anything to add on how best we can prepare ourselves?
I think, well, a couple of things. I'm amazed and impressed at Judge Weller's keeping of the journal. I did not do that, and it subsequently made my application incredibly burdensome on me, because I had to go back and figure out the dates that things happened, because they do ask you, they're just not asking about the trial. They're saying, what date did it happen? What's the contact information for opposing counsel? What's the contact information for your co-counsel? And so that is a very painful process if you're not tracking that information as you go. That's great. I strongly recommend that if you're thinking about applying for the bench at some point in the future. I would also say, and I like Judge Bershon, I was not in civil practice for very long. I was at a law firm for about 3 years, but I find civil practice to be incredibly uncivil. compared to criminal practice. Like criminal lawyers get along really well. I think it's because they're all repeat players, so they all have to, you know, treat each other respectfully and get along really well. That's 99.9% true, I would say. But so if you're going into civil practice, I think, you know, just like Judge Brisson said, not just when you're doing social media, but like even when you're communicating with opposing counsel, because I definitely remember there are times where firing an angry email off to opposing counsel is something that you desperately want to do because you're so mad at them for what they've done. I would, you know, I'm fine with you typing out that email and then deleting it before you send it. All right. Just because, you know, that lawyer, you never know what's going to happen to that email once you've sent it. That lawyer could keep it forever. And then, you know, 20 years down the road, when you're applying to be a judge, that lawyer will pull out that letter and say, see what this lawyer did to me in this litigation. And there won't be any context. There won't be any way for you to defend yourself. You'll just be in the no pile before you know it. So that's good advice, I think, from Judge Bershon.
Yeah, that is perfect. As Judge Bershon said, social media lasts forever. And as Judge Shu says, emails last forever. And Judge Edberg, do you have anything to add?
Sure, just to follow up a bit. Every interaction you have with every person you deal with, you have to figure that person may support or oppose your application. And in this profession, we do run into a lot of difficult people. Some may call them jerks, quote unquote, but deal with them respectfully. And as Judge Bershon and Judge Shu were saying, you know, I was in civil for about 10 years, give or take, and you are going to get very frustrated, very, very frustrated. So if you are going to type that email or make that phone call, just hold off, think about it. Also, advice that I would give is do the job that you have and do it well. You're more likely to be appointed based on how well you do your current job more than how well you will do the job once you get on the bench. So I think that is good information. Following up on one thing on what Judge Weller said, you know, keep your opposing counsel information, but also keep the case numbers, and the case name. That's very important as well. Also, just remember that every case you deal with is possibly going to affect your application. I have a very close friend who is a fantastic attorney, does some serious criminal law cases, death penalty cases, has done some serious civil work. And at one time, he was very overworked and overburdened, and he handled a case with the defendant, and he didn't do everything he should have done, unfortunately. And this individual was convicted, spent a couple decades in prison, and was later released. They found him to be innocent. And this person is a fantastic lawyer, a fantastic human being, but made a huge, huge mistake and is probably never going to be on the bench because of that mistake. So just do the job that you have and do that job well and focus on that. And that's my advice.
That's great, Judge Edberg.
Samantha, can I add one thing?
Yes, please do.
I forgot to mention this. This goes along with what Diego just said. To me, it's very, very important that you do your current job well and that other people think that you do your current job well. I feel like I have encountered lawyers that are in this process that think that it's a little bit like applying for college, where you want to like be in all these extracurriculars and like do all these extracurricular things in order to get yourself noticed and get you on the bench. That's important. I mean, showing community service is important, but it's not going to get you the job if you're no good at the job that you have. So I think that's very good advice.
Can I add something Judge Shu said as a coda to that too? We all encourage community involvement. I think everybody, all of my colleagues on this call are involved in the community in some way or another and have been consistently. But the appointment secretary is pretty smart and they look at dates. And if you just join whatever the organization is 1 year or 2 years before your application was put in, they're going to see through that. I'm the former president of the Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles many years ago. And sometimes I vet applications or, and I would see people who join, said, oh, I've been involved. And I joined last year. I was like, well, I didn't really see you at any events. And people talk. Again, people don't just talk amongst the legal community. They talk amongst all these various bar organizations. So we encourage you to be committed to these organizations, but do it early and show your commitment and pick something you like. I'm gonna on a tangent a little bit, but I can't tell you how much my connections in the Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles helped my judicial application. Judge Shu and I have a mutual friend and colleague, Judge Holly Fujier. I mean, she has 8 million mentees. Some of you may be one of her mentees, but she helped me prepare for my judicial interview. And I only knew her from being involved in the Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles. And a number of my colleagues on the bench are either former presidents of the Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles or other diversity bar organization. And it's a great networking and mentoring organization. Many of them are great mentoring organizations, but get started early. Many of these different organizations have free law school memberships, Latino lawyers, Langston Bar, Black women lawyers, all the various Asian Pacific Islander legal organizations. There's so many, Scala, APABA, CABA. I think most of them have free or low cost student memberships. And I would urge you to join one of them and get involved early. You're going to make connections and you're going to show that community involvement early.
Thank you
Don't
so
feel
much.
as if, I'm sorry. Don't feel as if you have to overextend yourself. I completely agree with Judge Bershon. Pick some organizations or pick an organization that you truly like. Don't feel compelled to be a part of it. But if you are, get into it and find your niche. Because what you'll find with a lot of these bar associations, okay, you join, and then there are a number of subcommittees. So then you're faced with the question of, okay, am I going to be a chair of one of these subcommittees? What are you going to do? And so just a brief example, I'm a member of Langston. I became a member because I wanted to and I enjoyed it. So then the question was, am I going to be a member of a subcommittee? And for me, my answer was yes, but I found something that I was passionate about. And what I was passionate about was seeing more people of color, more minorities on the bench. And so I was a co-chair of the Bench and Bar Committee for several years in Langston, because as an attorney, I noticed when I was going all over the county doing cases that I wasn't seeing a lot of people that looked like me or looked like my friends or family on the bench. And so for me, that was an area of interest for me. You have to find what an area of interest is for you and pursue it. And as my colleague said, it's going to show. It'll either show in the dates or during this process, there are a number of interviews. And I'm not talking 10 or 15-minute interviews. These interviews last an hour and a half, 2 hours or more. And they're not drilling you, but they really want to know who you are and what you're about. And so they're going to ask you a lot of questions about your background. You're going to turn in a resume, so they're going to know where you worked and for how long. They want to know about you, the person. What do you do after work? What are you really involved in and why? And so be prepared for those questions now.
Thank you so much for adding that. You are making my job very easy, because my next question was going to be about community involvement, community service, and volunteer work. And so what it sounds like is that we should start early and we should make sure that it's natural, because they can tell if we're just doing it for the application. Specifically, when you join those bar associations or anything else, how did specific volunteer work or community service play a role in your applications? I would love to hear from any of you. Judge Edber, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Sure. In terms of my community service, so I did not extend myself. I had several young kids and was married and so forth. And so I didn't have a lot of time, but I've been involved at the time with an organization, the Village Family Services, and I was on the board and still am on the board going on 20 years now. So I was very involved with an organization that provides services to foster youth and so forth. And so I didn't have an opportunity to say I was a member of 10 different organizations. I was a member of 2 or 3, but heavily involved in one. And I think the appointment secretary understood that, appreciated that, and like my colleagues have been saying, they want to make sure that you're well-rounded. And so part of that is being involved in the community, obviously. So, just to come back at it, and as what Judge Weller was saying, is be involved in something, be involved in something that you enjoy, be involved in something that you can give back. And it's not quantity, it's quality.
Thank you, Judge Edburn. I think that goes back to what you were saying about not overextending yourself and making sure you don't make large mistakes like that example of your friend. It's really important that we have self-regulation as law students and as lawyers. And I'll throw it back to any of the other panelists if you wanted to add anything else before I move on to a next question about community service or volunteer work. Perfect.
I guess, sorry, I can go. I agree with Judge Edburn that it doesn't have to be a bar organization. As long as you're committed to it, it doesn't matter what the community service is, as long as you're doing it and are committed to it. I think that's what's the most important.
Can I add one thing to that? So I was appointed under Governor Brown, and I remember, there's all these considerations when you're putting your application, but one of the things is you're supposed to have 5 references, right? And somebody who was very wise told me, I knew a bunch of judges and lawyers, and I knew a bunch of police chiefs, which at the time was not necessarily a good thing to have. There's a whole story about that. That's a sidebar. But somebody said to me, they want the references to see how well-rounded you are. So everybody can have a judge, but if you've worked with a community organization, or you've helped give legal advice to a women's shelter, whatever it is, have them be your reference, because they can then, to Judge Weller's point, they can talk about you as a person, not just you as a lawyer, not just you as a student, but who you are as a person, those things that may not jump right out off of the application. They can talk about how dedicated, committed, and ethical, how much you were willing to sacrifice your own personal time. Judge Edburn's pointed to the work that he did, and how much time, let's say if he had someone from the organization he worked with, to talk about the personal sacrifice he made to that organization. So when you make those connections, those are other people who can speak to what kind of a person you are.
I completely agree. I can remember, because the process you're going to go through is you're going to keep drafting your application and working on it. And so during the time when I was working on my application, I just call them editors. I had about 2 editors, mentors, who I would give my application to, and they would take their red pen and tear it apart. So I'm getting closer to the end process where I'm ready to submit. And it was this crossroads, because it was one mentor who I really respected, and his train of thought was, for those 5 that Judge Prashant was talking about, you should have 5 stars on there. If there's some way politically connected or well-known or famous and them, go for it. Then there was another school of thought where you should have people that just really know you and just deeply know you. And I went with that latter decision, because one of the people I put on, and I tell people now that I mentor about the application, each person, you have to make the decision that's best for you. But I had a combination of judges, a couple of attorneys, and then to Judge Prashant's point, my 5th one was my old pastor from my childhood church. He had known me literally from the age of 5. He saw me grow up. He helped support and mentor me during college. We had worked together. The church had a scholarship fund. I was a co-chair of that. And so my thinking was, if anyone knew me, knew my community involvement, it would be him. And can he talk to the motion work that I did in the trials? Well, no, but that's what I have the 3 other people for. I have him because he helps complete this picture. And so that's something for everyone to consider when you're working on your application. Don't be discouraged if you don't know the lieutenant governor or this well-known power broker. I'm a testament to that. I didn't know any power brokers. I didn't have any political juice. So that's not needed in order to submit that application, but you do need people that know you well, and then will support your application.
Thank you, Judge Weller. It really seems like the common thread is authenticity and being your authentic self, and then using that to create relationships that last and mentorships. Speaking of something that you said, Judge Weller, when you said that you didn't see a lot of people who looked like you on the bench, and I'm sure every one of our panelists has experienced that at some point in their career. So in terms of diversity hiring, what programs does the court or this committee specifically participate in, support, or sponsor to promote diversity on the bench? And Judge Weller, if you want to start, that would be great.
Sure, they have started and have a mentorship program that I have in current communication with colleagues, and I'm a participant as a mentor myself. That is very helpful in, one, encouraging people to apply, and also assisting people through the application process. Additionally, throughout the years, the Superior Court has had a judicial diversity summit where during a weekend, they'll have judges come from the Superior Court, a representative from what's known as the Jenny Commission that Judge Hsu talked about. They normally would have the governor's appointment secretary as well come down and speak and talk about the application. And then also it's a good opportunity, because I attended that on at least 2 occasions. It's a great opportunity to pick up informally and network and talk with and develop mentorships with other judges. And so those are the type of programs that the LA Superior Court has been doing.
That's incredible. Judge Edberg, did you have anything to add?
Just to follow up on your question, one of the programs I've been involved in is called Constitution and Me. And so what I do is I go to local high schools. I've been to, I believe, Canoga Park High School, and I think Van Nuys as well. And what we do is we go to the government class or the history class, and we give them a hypothetical. For example, someone sends a tweet or something on a unofficial school account about some type of threat, and we talk about legal issues and so forth. So we try to get kids engaged and involved early in the process. And also when I talk to the high school students and I ask them, who thinks, they can be a judge of the kids who want to, not a lot of people raise their hand. So I always tell people, look, I came to this country and I did not speak a word of English. I grew up in Canoga Park. I grew up in Van Nuys. I didn't know any attorneys growing up until I was probably in 7th or 8th grade. And it was a friend of mine's dad who was an attorney. I don't think I ever met a judge until after law school. So I just want to let everyone know that, and of course I didn't have any political connections, and I wish I did. But I want to let everyone know that, you can do it. It's attainable. And to reach out and contact the bench. We are, I don't want to speak for everyone, but the people I know are more than happy to talk to students. We're more than happy to help. So just reach out, and I'll be happy to share my email with any of the Loyola students. So if anyone ever wants to reach out to me, I'll be happy to talk to you. Not a problem.
Judge Edberg, those are great comments. I think that especially when students don't have exposure to the law, to judges, it can seem very out of reach. So it's incredible to hear that, and the Constitution and Me sounds like a wonderful program. Judge Hsu, do you have anything to add?
I think there are affinity judges associations as well. There's the California Asian Pacific American Judges Association, of which I'm a contributing member, and we have our own mentoring program that works with the local API bar organizations. I think there are equivalents for all of the other affinity groups with the court. And I think that the most important thing, all of these programs are designed, are targeting increasing the flow in the pipeline. Like, you can't have diversity on the bench unless you have diversity of qualified applicants to the bench. And so I think I echo what Judge Edberg tells the high school students. It's true for you too. This is an achievable goal. Don't write yourself off just because you don't know any. I didn't know anyone either when I went to law school. So I mean, this is something that you can do. So if you want to do it, you can design your career in a way to put yourself in a position to do it a few years in. And don't take yourself out of the running just because you don't think just because you don't see people like you and don't think you can do it yourself. It can be done.
Judge
Can I add one thing to that? The two biggest committees, we have different committees on our court. The two biggest one with the most amount of members are the community outreach and the diversity committee. I'm the former co-vice chair of our courts diversity committee, and I'm the vice chair of the California Judges Association's diversity and inclusivity committee. And I can't tell you how many judges volunteer for programs and are willing to give up their time to speak to students. And Sandra's nodding her head. I mean, Sandra knows she's the administrator for all these programs. She knows. I mean, those judges, the ones that sort of the stereotype, the most curmudgeonly ones you think, are really mean. They're the ones who were signing up to come talk to students. My colleagues love to mentor and talk to students. And I can't tell you how many times I and my other colleagues, we'll be in the court, we're doing our thing, we're looking down and we see a high school student. And I can't tell you how many times judges stop what they're doing and they say, this is pre-COVID, remember, say to their clerk, go find out if that person's a student. And the judge will say, hey, are you a student? Are you interested in law? Do you want to, this is again, do you want to come back to my chambers? They do it all the time. So to echo what Judge Hsu said, don't put roadblocks in front of yourself arbitrarily. Judges love to mentor our court. I mean, we could spend all day. My husband says I have no hobbies. My hobby is diversity, mentoring, pipeline, encouraging. There are so many programs on this court with our bar, on the state court. There are so many programs and they are not lacking from want of volunteers of judicial officers who want to volunteer. So there are people out there, they just want you to ask. I mean, it's so funny. I do all these mentoring events and so many times we have 2 times as many mentors as we do mentees. I see Judge Hsu smiling. I don't know if that's been his experience. The opportunities are there. You just have to take them.
These are really important words. I think that if you don't see people on the bench that look like you, a lot of us can deal with imposter syndrome. And what we've heard today is that there are many, many groups that are actively going against that. And your words are very important. And I like what Judge Hsu said about you can craft a career to get there no matter what. And going off of that, what do you think are, if there are any specific practice areas that could enhance students' marketability as a prospective judge, if you think there are any, or if you could go any route to make it to the bench? I would love to hear your thoughts. Judge Hsu, if you'd like to start.
So the answer is definitely you can take any route to get to the bench. All the 4 judges on this call all took different routes to get to the bench. You can do anything. There used to be this perspective that you needed to have a lot of trial experience before you would get appointed to the bench. I don't think that's been true for at least 2 governors. I don't know. Obviously this is very governor specific because they have absolute discretion as to who to appoint. But I don't think that's a prerequisite anymore. And I wonder actually if it might be some advantage to pick one of the disciplines that the court has, but hardly ever gets lawyers applying from them. So for example, family law. Family law is an incredibly large and important, portion of what the LA Superior Court judges do. And there are very few family law lawyers that apply to the bench. And I gotta think, I have no inside knowledge about this, but I gotta think that when they get a family law applicant, the governor's office gotta be like, oh, this is great. Someone who actually knows something about family law going to the bench. I would think that actually that would be an advantage.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. Judge Edberg, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say, agreeing with Judge Hsu is do what you like and do it well. Those are the 2 important words I have to say or comments regarding what career you should choose. Do not choose a career because you think it's going to be easiest to get on the bench. I think if you do that, you're going to be in trouble.
It again goes back to that authenticity is very important in this process. Judge Weller, did you have anything to add?
Just briefly, and more importantly, just for your own quality of life, you want to choose something that you actually enjoy. I chose this particular path before getting on the bench because I enjoyed that job. I enjoyed that particular specialty. And so that would be my advice. Don't craft your career choice pre-bench to what you think would be impressive. Because as Judge Chu said, who knows, there may be at least between now and 10 years, at least 2 different governors by then, different policies. And so for now, keep that long-term goal of wanting to become a judge. But as far as your next career, choose something that you will actually enjoy, because at the end of the day, that passion will show if you're really enjoying it, whether it's family law, probate, civil litigation, criminal litigation. If you truly enjoy it and you're vested in it, it's going to show and shine through your application.
Thank you, Judge Weller. And Judge Bershon, I'll give you the opportunity if you wanted to add anything.
Just a little supplement, and not necessarily for you law students, but once you get in your career, if you are thinking about going on the bench and you recognize you have certain weaknesses, areas you don't. So for example, you get negatives when they evaluate as you as a candidate, and hopefully your negative is that they think you're unethical or have a bad temperament. Because if you get that, you're probably not going to get appointed. But if you get a negative, my negatives were I have no probate, family law, or juvenile experience. And they were right, I didn't. What I did do, and I was a court commissioner before I was on the bench, I started to take family law classes. And since I was a commissioner at the time, I had the benefit of taking advantage of the court's education, but I tried to supplement that. So for example, if you never get into a courtroom, right? Let's say you're at a private firm and you're making big bucks and you're in their litigation division, but no one ever sees the inside of a courtroom, no one ever gets to trial. There are certain programs that allow you to go try cases for certain municipal agencies. I think the city attorney, I don't know, Judge Edberg was there more recently than I. They had what they call the TAP program. I don't know if you want to speak to that. Let them speak, and attorneys could try cases. I don't know, Judge Edberg, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I think they still have it, the Trial Advocacy Project. And so they have attorneys coming in from firms, private firms who want trial experience. So Judge Bershon's right. That's one way to get trial experience if you're working in a discipline where you're not in court.
That is very helpful and great to know that no matter what we choose, there will always be opportunities to supplement and create a career, create a resume that will be perfect for the bench. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. I would like to give a chance to our audience to ask any questions. So if you would like to raise your virtual Zoom hand and I can call on you. And if not, I have plenty of questions for our panelists as well. I actually will start with one. I am curious why each of you decided to make the transition from lawyer to bench officer, if that was something that you always knew you wanted, when it changed, if it did change. And Judge Edberg, I'd love to start with you.
All right. So the transition I decided to make, I was at the Attorney General's office and I fell in love with litigation. I was doing a lot of writing, so I wrote a lot of demurs and summary judgment motions and 12b6s. And I discovered my favorite part of the job was actually being in court. So I decided to make a move from civil to criminal, and I became a prosecutor. And as part of a prosecutor, as part of that job, a lot of times, if you choose to be, you can be in court every day. So I was in court every day, and I just fell in love with it. I like dealing with people in criminal, as my colleagues can tell you. You know, there's a lot of quick thinking on your feet, and there's not a lot of writing and briefing. So I discovered I really, really enjoyed that. I was lucky enough to appear before a judge who became my mentor. He suggested that I apply for the bench, and I did so. And, you know, lucky enough, many years later, I think it was 7 after I applied, I was appointed. Like Judge Bershon, I became a commissioner before that because I really did just want to get on the bench. And so I worked my butt off as a commissioner, and not too far after that, I was fortunate enough to be appointed. So that's kind of why I made the transition.
That's an incredible path to the bench. Judge Weller, I would love to hear about your path.
And so a couple things started happening over the years. Initially, no, I was pleased with what I was doing. I saw myself retiring as a prosecutor. And then as time wore on, it was a combination of things. First, I think I stated it earlier, through the Langston Bar Association, I worked with their bench and bar committee. As a part of that, I used to put on me and other bar associations programs regarding how to get appointed by the governor. And so I wasn't interested at the time, but I would organize those events. And so listening to the judges on those panels got me curious and started thinking, is this something that I would want to do? At first, I thought I could be an advocate all my career, but at that point in time, I was getting a little tired of being an advocate and I want to change gears. And so that was one part of things. The second part was I had a mentor who was a judge, and he suggested, John, you need to look beyond this particular career, think about a second career. And then finally, one of the things that some prosecutors do, and I did it for a period of time, you're a calendar, what's called a calendar DA, where you're not doing trials, but you're in court all day long. You're doing the discovery for different trials. You're gathering information. I was standing in for another colleague who was ill temporarily. And during that time, the judge had me approach and he said, John, have you thought about becoming a judge? Which was a great compliment. And the combination of all those three, that's what started getting me down the path of, I think I can do this and I think I should do this. And I started looking at the application and it went from there.
That's wonderful. And the reminder of when we believe in ourselves, everything that we can do is incredible. Judge Bershon, I'd love to hear about your path to the bench as well.
My path was very circuitous. I was not a good, I'd like to think I was a good advocate, but I think I had some cognitive dissonance when I was in private practice. First, I did bankruptcy from the debtor side, and I always felt bad about the mom and pop creditors who weren't getting their money because they were unsecured. So that wasn't good. And then, when I was doing construction defect litigation, I was always looking at the other side. I remember some partner saying, he's like, you're not advocating for the other side. But I kept trying to think about, what was the other side thinking? Then I became a prosecutor, and we don't have all day. I had a very interesting career at the city attorney's office, but I worked in the gang unit during the Rampart gang scandal. I don't know. You're all too young to remember all of that. Watch the movie Training Day. It was loosely based on that. And I remember thinking, I can't be a prosecutor anymore because of some of the things that were going on at the time. So I went to the Inspector General's office, which is civilian oversight of law enforcement. And that was the first time, because we would review complaints of misconduct. We would review officer involved shootings. We would do audits. And it was the first time I was able to look at both sides. And that was actually my job, is to look at all sides, look at the police officer sides, look at the community side, look at the victim sides. Were there any political interests, things like that? And we were looking at all constituencies and all perspectives, fair, independent, objective oversight. And we would come up with our own conclusion based on all of the sides. And I sort of felt, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is my comfort zone. And so I guess it just was sort of a natural transition then to go to the bench. I became a court commissioner because I felt like I'd been out of the courtroom for a while and I didn't know that many judges. And so it was sort of a natural progression, and it got me on the bench. And I got to say, for any of you who are considering that, think about becoming a court commissioner first. It's sort of, you get your training. That's where you put your training wheels on and you learn about, court management, judicial demeanor, running a courtroom. And it is also a really good vetting ground for the governors and their committees, because they see what kind of bench officer you are. They can see if you're impatient, if you're rude, if you're unethical, or alternatively, if you have a great reputation and people love you. It's a great vetting ground to become a judge. So mine was a very circuitous route, but I think I'm now where I'm supposed to be.
Thank you, Judge Bershon. It's a great reminder that as we go through law school and we try different practice areas and maybe one doesn't fit, that this career is ever evolving and we can always find exactly where we're meant to be. Judge Shu, I'd love to hear your path to the bench as well.
So I actually went to law school to be a prosecutor. That's what I had always wanted to do since I was in high school, basically. And when I got the job at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I went in with the mantra of, the president is going to have to call me and ask me to do something else for me to leave this job. because I love that job so much. But there was our friend in common that Judge Bershon mentioned earlier, Judge Fujie. She calls me a law nerd, and I totally embrace that description. I love the law, and I'm very interested in the law, and I have a very strong predisposition to want to know what the right answer is. And I have a very distinct memory when I was a first-year summer associate at a law firm, and I wrote this memo on a legal issue, and I handed it to the associate, and the associate read it and said to me, well, I'm not sure why you're telling me all this. The way that you should do this is to write the opposition to the other side, and then just fill in whatever cases you think help us. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that is not my job. Like, you got to figure out what the law is. And so even at the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I feel like, the mantra is, do justice all the time to come to the right answer, you're still answering to main justice. You're still answering to other people. Whereas as a bench officer, you really can decide what the right thing is to do in every single case, and just do that without, concerns about anything else, what the client thinks, what, the other side thinks. You could just do what's right. And to me, that's what sort of I feel like it compelled me eventually to apply for the job.
It's such an important reminder that when we are reading these opinions and we think they could go a different way, that one day you could be on the bench and doing the right thing. So I cannot thank you all enough. Judge Shu, Judge Bershon, Judge Edberg, Judge Weller. It has been an incredible hour. I have learned so much. I know our audience has learned so much. Thank you for being here and representing an incredible panel of judges. Everyone give a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.